My name is Brenda Risch. I use she, her, and they, them. I identify as a lesbian, and I think I'm non-binary, even though no one wants to accept that. But it's me, and I can say what I want. I was born in St. Louis, Missouri, in the county, actually. And I grew up in Beaufort, Missouri, on a farm, near Beaufort, because you don't really live in a city when you are on a farm, right? And I went to high school in a little place called Union, which was the county seat for Franklin County, which is the county next to St. Louis County. So right outside of St. Louis, about an hour outside of St. Louis in the farmland. I mean, I think I had a typical farm upbringing in the sense that, you know, lots of chores, lots of outside activity, lots of emphasis. My parents really emphasized education and reading. Like, they loved to read themselves, and so they would take us to the library every Saturday. That was our treat. So I was a big reader always, and that really stood me in good stead. I loved school because it was my main social outlet. It's the only time to see other people my age. I developed a real can-do attitude from growing up on a farm. You know, you can't exactly run to the store and buy something when you need something. So you have to figure out, what do I have on hand that I can meet the need with, right? So I need to fix the baler, and I need this kind of thing. Well, I don't have that thing, and I can't go to the store and buy it. So what can I make, right? So you learn to be innovative and creative and fearless. And those things they sound blithe, but they are deeply important. Because being innovative, creative, and fearless made the BRC, right? It made everything in my life happen. Everything. From my education to my personal life, everything has been about that. Because if you're afraid to act, you can't move forward, you know? The dark side of the farmland is that it's a very homophobic space. It was a socially progressive space in the sense that people were for unions and for, you know, government and, like, you know, regulations. We should have protections and things like that. They weren't Republicans, or, you know, not when I was growing up. Missouri is like that now, but it wasn't like that when I was a kid, not where I lived. There were the pro-union, pro-labor kind of old school Democrats, right? And so things were socially progressive in that sense, but very, very, like, kind of middle America in every other way. You know, traditional families, family values. You would shame people that got pregnant in high school, stuff like that, right? So I had a typical 80s high school, early 80s high school experience. The minute I had an opportunity to leave, I left. Like any smart kid would do, or any queer kid would do. So a smart queer kid was out of there before the dust could settle. And I did that through getting an education. I got a scholarship and an opportunity to go to Northwestern University in Evanston, right outside of Chicago, and I never looked back. When I look back on that experience, you know, going to school with incredibly elitely wealthy and privileged, culturally privileged people, they had no idea of my experience as a poor white American. They had no clue what that was. You know, my dad had been a plumber, so we were kind of solidly working class. And then he was injured when I was going into the 6th grade. His back was crushed at work. He was told he'd never walk again. He could never lift anything over 4 pounds, and he'd never be able to work. But he wasn't disabled enough to be getting disability. It's America. America, you're free to survive and become a billionaire, and you're free to starve, right? So we used food stamps. I've been in the grocery store and been shamed publicly, violently, by people. You know, I remember, I will never forget standing next to my mother in the grocery line and having the checker, in the most bitchy voice ever, at the top of her lungs, be like, "You can't use food stamps for that," right? Because it was still the coupons, right? And so you couldn't just swipe a card. And, like, having everyone in the store turn and look and start talking about you. And when you're like a junior high kid, you know, that's horrible. It's a horrible thing. I mean, did we ever go hungry? No, we never went hungry because we had a farm, right? So we always had our goats, our chickens, our yard, you know, our garden, our animals, right? But whew, And it sucks as much for a white kid as it does for a black kid or a brown kid, right? Like, it doesn't matter who you are when your mom's being shamed in front of her peers, right? It doesn't matter what your identity is. All that matters is that it's happening to you. So, that was part of my experience too, was being poor. Like, going from having been stable to having people sitting in offices where people would say to your parents, well, sell the car and the house that you have, and then come back and we'll see what we can do for you. And my parents saying, well, that's the only things we have. Why would we give those up? Right? Oh, well, you don't qualify for anything then. That's a really difficult question. I don't know. I would say high school probably. Because, honestly, I didn't even know what queer was. Like, I knew about gay men in high school, and I had a gay friend. And we were best friends, and we pretended to date. So he would be safe, because he was already being bullied by people. And there were girls, he was a very attractive man. And so very cute girls were after him. And I remember this one very popular cheerleader who started spreading a rumor that she had given him the opportunity to sleep with her, and he didn't take advantage. So he must be gay, because he didn't want to hit that, right? And I'm like, not that anybody used that language then, but that's what it was about, right? And I remember I just went up to her and I said, if you don't shut your mouth, I'm going to beat the crap out of you. So you better stop talking about my boyfriend, right? And that's how we started dating. It was hilarious, right? So I actually was put in a position where I had to be a bully to keep someone else from being bullied and to be safe. And then also, of course, had to lie on top of that, because I knew that wasn't what our relationship was about. Not really. But it was super confusing. I'm like, what is it about? I don't know. I love my friend. I don't want him to die. I don't want his family to be shamed and burned out of their house and lynched because they find out he's gay. Because that's what would have happened to them, potentially. He ended up graduating a year early and leaving. And so I had to stay and he could go. That's another devastating thing. What do you do with that? So, I'm witty, I'm entertaining. I could be the clown. Everybody liked me. The stoners liked me, the athletes liked me, the smart kids liked me, everybody liked me. I stood up for every person who got bullied by the teachers to the extreme, right? And that's how I survived that. But when your first experiences of intimacy and sexuality are not chosen experiences, how do you know who you are? So I'm a survivor of violence. I had nowhere to go. The only thing I could do was get the fuck out of there, and that's what I did. And along the way, I protected and defended, because that's what I was taught to do. I was taught that if you're smart, if you're capable, you have more responsibility than everybody else. That if you misuse that power in any way, then you are the scum of the earth. And so you had always better be careful to be doing the right thing for everybody, because you've been given talents and capabilities beyond the average. And so that was a heavy burden too, So, I don't know. I do remember in college, when I fell in love with my roommate my sophomore year. I was living in a co-ed fraternity house. Fell in love with my roommate. We were having a relationship that she wouldn't acknowledge. And across the hall from us it had rooms of varying sizes, and the room across the hall had 5 or 6 people living in it, because it was huge, right? And they were part of a Wiccan coven. And it was a really hot day in Evanston, and we had all the windows and doors open for cross breeze. And I answered. One of the girls in that room answered the phone in her room as I was walking by and said hello. And the person on the phone said to her, well, who was that? And she goes, oh, it was just that nice dyke from next door. And I remember thinking, what? Dyke? I'm not a dyke. What's a dyke? What? And then the only picture that came to my mind was a big woman in flannel and jeans and boots who drives a 16-wheeler and beats the fuck out of people if they look at her wrong, and has a big studded belt and, you know, and probably a leather jacket and is like tough as shit, you know? I'm like, I'm not a dyke. What's a dyke? What? And so I immediately went to the library to try to figure this out. That was when I knew. Right? So I tried to have a conversation with this about with my girlfriend. And it was the summer when, obviously it was hot. It was the summer when this was happening, and I was in summer school, and she was doing an internship at like a PBS station. And I'm talking to her, and she's like, I'm not a lesbian. And I'm like, well, two girls having sex, like lesbian, like that's what it is, right? Like, I'm not a lesbian. And I came home like 2 weeks later, and I'm like, somebody's in the room. That's weird. And so I walk in, the door's open, I walk in, and there's my girlfriend having sex with this guy in our bed. And I'm like, literally just went ice cold, slammed the door shut, and went down to the common room and sat down. And everybody's like, oh shit. Like literally people in the house were going, oh shit. And I didn't know what to think. I'm just like, what is happening? And, you know, now I know what was happening is that she was terrified and in denial, and she was trying to, you know, fuck the gay away. Right? Well, if I have sex with enough men enough times, then I won't be gay anymore. And I don't need to be scared. Right? And she disappeared. And then I just kind of hung out, you know, on my own for a while. Like, what the hell? Didn't date anybody. Didn't want to be involved with anybody. Like, none of this, right? So, yeah. So that was kind of my young queer life. When did it get better? Everybody wants to know, right? The magical moment when it got better, when you press the button and it got better. It was so incremental. I don't even know if I can answer that, right? Like what happened is I just did what I do, which is I just kept moving forward, right? And so I focused on the things that I loved and I was passionate about, like being an educated person, learning. I loved learning. I traveled. I studied abroad. I went to graduate school. I started a business. I made friends. I lived my life, you know? And I did my work too. I went to therapy. I did my work, right? I didn't date anybody during that whole time. Like I was single for longer than anyone else I know ever. And it was because after that experience, I was like, I'm not going to get involved with someone until I know I'm ready to not do something horrible to them, right? From my own childhood shit, my own baggage. And I'm not going to get involved in casual things because I'm not a casual person. I've never been casual about anything, much less a relationship, right? And so I spent like the vast majority of my young life single and just doing my life. And that's really weird, really weird. So I avoided a lot of drama. I learned a lot of relationship skills by having very close, very good friends, by dealing with my family, coming out to them, all that. And when I did start to date and all that, then it was good usually. Like I still am cordial with the people I've dated. There's not a single ex I have who I hate or like, other than that first person who literally is invisible and disappeared. And I have no idea what happened to her. To this day, still can't figure it out, even with modern means. So yeah, so like there were some rough times in there, right? But it wasn't like it is now where you could like know who you are because people talked about things. Like those words weren't even said out loud, much less had a name to. Like I literally didn't know like what is a lesbian, right? Like all I knew was dyke, and all I knew about dyke was she's a scary woman who probably had gone to prison at some point, right? And you better not fuck with her. Like literally, and you use that word fuck, you better not fuck with her because she would mess you up, right? I mean, my parents weren't religious. That was the only difference. And that's because before I was born, the Catholic Church tried to get my dad to tithe when he was unemployed. And he said, you know, my responsibility is first to my family and children. And as soon as I have a job, I'll pay our dues or whatever. And the priest went nuts and yelled at him. And my dad said, never again. Yeah, we're out. This isn't about my belief or my faith or the relationship I have with God. This is about you getting your cash. Yeah. So I was raised to be very skeptical of religion and of the military and of organized sports. You know, I mean, it's like he's just like, this is people being used for entertainment, He said, these people don't realize they're being used like animals for their physical abilities. They might as well be a talking dog or a dancing walrus. And I don't hold with that. He said, that's modern slavery. You know, so he was like a radical in some like really interesting ways. He was a very intelligent man who had very little formal education. Like he had gotten through high school and he did an associate's degree because he was in a teacher training program. But then when Reagan was elected, they cut anybody over 40 from the program. So he couldn't complete it. So he had all this like pragmatic, like vocational experience. He could have been an amazing vo-tech teacher for a high school. Like he was a natural teacher to start with. That's how I got to be a teacher, was from my parents, right? So, you know, but all that was wasted because he didn't tick the box. So, you know, I have a healthy disregard for wanting to tick the boxes. Yeah. And so I have real issues with authority and with restrictive, nonsensical, like non-thinking kinds of guidelines. Like I don't mind guidelines that have a purpose, right? But, you know, categories that have a reason. But if you're telling me I have to stay within the lines just because you like the lines, no. Don't give up. Absolute first rule, don't give up. Don't let the bastards win. That's your first choice, right? When you're in despair, you either choose to give up or you choose to go on. You got to choose to go on, because unless you choose to go on, you can't have ever have anything better, right? So if you want something better in your life, you got to choose to go on, whether it's hard or not, right? You got to muster together the grit. You got to suck it up. You got to go on, and you got to keep asking for help. You got to keep looking. That's part of going on and not giving up, right? Not stoically doing it on your own, but like doggedly asking everywhere for help. I mean, do you know how many people I asked for help? I never got help. Never as a kid. I asked so many adults. No one ever did what they were supposed to do. But I never gave up, right? And in fact, I was the advocate for everybody else, right? So like, I'm like, if they're not going to do it, if they're not going to do right, that doesn't mean I'm not going to do right, right? I know what's right. I know right from wrong. I know what needs to be done. And I'm not going to sit here and watch somebody be stepped on and not speak up, right? And it's that grit that makes me who I am, right? That's me. But that's the BRC too, right? Like, so the state won't give us funding, so the city's not funding us, so the county's not giving us jack. So what? We will plant our own bushes, we will harvest our own berries, and we'll make our own damn pie. Because that's what a farm girl does, right? Just like the people who lived here, there was no, way to plant fields of grain, so they eat cactuses and they plant squashes and corns and beans together so they support each other. Like, people adapt to what they've got, man, and they learn how to live in the environment they're in. That's us here at the border, and that's me, Brenda, and that's why I fit here. I fit here because this is a working class city. I fit here because people here have grit. The people that matter, You talk to anybody in the city who's not just a money pocket, and at the core is the grit. You'll see it every time.